Bismillahirrahmanirrahim wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Peace and love, beautiful people. This is Brother Ali. This is the Travelers Podcast. Welcome. Assalamu alaikum. May peace be upon you. May salam, may wholeness be your reality. May you be unbroken. May you be whole. May you have the ability to be sound and complete in mind, body, spirit, in your reality, in your secret. May all of that be one. May you be a person of integrity. May we all be that. May that be the truth for all of us. The Travelers Podcast is about the fact that we're all co-travelers in a journey of life. We're sharing the human condition. We're in this world as it is. And it's really important that each of us carries a part of one another's story and saga. Stories are how we understand ourselves. You know, a human being is a collection of stories. And story is where we derive meaning and where we connect to the importance of it all, to the great why of it all. And so the Travelers Podcast is me exploring life with the people that I do life with. And I've been profoundly blessed and tremendously gifted to share life with really amazing, beautiful people who are on the journey that I'm on. A lot of them are artists, some of them are thought leaders, some of them are community leaders, some of them are, parents and folks that go through life with a sense of purpose, being driven by a sense of duty, love, service. And the guest that we have this week is really amazing. This is a name that's going to be known. A lot of people on this podcast are legends to a certain circle of people. But a lot of time, the greatest legends are secrets to the broader society. And that's one of the people that we have with us today is Mathieu Bitton. Some people call him Matthew. When he introduced himself to me, he said Mathieu. And so I try to pronounce it that way. This man is an ocean without a shore. I mean, he's known for being a photographer. A lot of the world knows him for the work that he's done over the last several years with Dave Chappelle. He travels almost exclusively with Dave Chappelle. But he's done amazing work throughout, particularly the music industry. You'll hear that, his love for art and fashion and culture and music and the humanity of the people that bring these things into the world came from his family and from his early life. He grew up in Paris. And the love of collecting records is what starts it all. So it's really a hip hop thing, that the great DJs and beat diggers and record collectors are the ones that really bring hip hop into existence by merging and understanding the symbiosis, the way that all of these things can be brought together, the alchemy of it all, This is the beauty of hip hop culture, and it's the beauty of the culture that we share. So Mathieu is somebody that grew up collecting records and then really fell in love with the visual aspect of the way that this beautiful art and culture and the people that created are represented. So, I mean, just to name a few of the people that he's worked with, has been Prince. Worked very closely with Prince. He worked very closely with Lenny Kravitz. And now is working really closely with Dave Chappelle. But I mean, Quincy Jones, he's been nominated for Grammys. He's worked on film, with Martin Scorsese. I mean, every time that this brother goes into a field and immerses himself, Allah brings him together and he'll say, God or the universe or the divine, like all of these names. And one of the things that he says is that whatever deity, whatever divine essence we're seeking, it's all one. And as a Jewish brother, we're speaking the same language. When the first statement of every Muslim that brings us into this religion is La ilaha illallah, that there's no divine other than the one universal creator of it all, other than the one universal author of all of our stories. And so this is the way that we connect. And Matthew's work is incredible. His story is incredible. So I'm so grateful to be able to share. I'm going to shut up and jump into this conversation with my brother. We're brought to you, as always, by the Zakat Foundation. And this particular episode is also brought to you by Udamentary and Mystic Man, men's hair care, beard care products, all that good stuff. Enjoy this amazing conversation with my brother, Mathieu Bitton. You know, when we first rolled out the podcast, you're one of the people that was high on my list to talk to. Partially because everyone that's been on the podcast so far are people that I know and love. And, you know, we're both blessed to know so many incredible people. And some of them I talk to all the time. Like, it was really difficult, like, interviewing Amir Suleiman, because, like, we lived together and it wasn't
Right.
really an interview. We ended up just kind of talking about whatever we would have talked about anyway. And people are like, oh, this is fun hearing you guys talk, but I wanted to learn about Amir. But then there are some people that I come across that I'm like, this person is an ocean without a shore. And I've never really had the opportunity to really sit and ask. Every time I think I know how dope you are, I learn something new. You know what I mean?
You're making me blush now.
No, man, it's like just when you think you know all the evil that white supremacy has done, you learn about a whole decade of like stuff that you never knew about. You know what I mean? And the same way
Right,
is
right.
the same is true with you and all the amazing things you've done. So I want to start with just a little bit about your family background because I know that it's really interesting and nuanced. Like, what do you feel like sharing about your family and?
I mean, listen, I was born in Paris, France in 1973. My parents were both born in Cairo, Egypt,
Mhm.
uh, in 1945, both the same month, this August 1945. My grandparents were from Alexandria and Cairo. And then before that, Turkey, where you currently are. And then before that, Spain. And so we're Sephardic Jews. And in 1956, with the whole Canal de Suez uh, um, events, they basically had to flee Egypt, because they were French, in Egypt, and also Jewish, and were kind of no longer welcome at that time. And so they fled to Paris. A lot of my family from Egypt fled to Brazil. But we ended up, my family ended up in Paris, and thus where my sister and I were born. But there was always a lot of trauma. I think, hearing it as a kid from my grandparents, and, leaving a place you love, leaving home and overnight. My grandfather, his name was Rafael Abulafia, and myself and my son Miles both carry his name, Rafael, as a middle name. And he was just amazing, just towering figure, big guy. I think I inherited that from him. Just beautiful man, and just, always taught me that, even though they went through that, and they were basically, his banker called him and said, hey, you have to leave now, otherwise they're coming to, arrest you. And I guess at that point, this is 1956, and, you know, I wasn't really aware that, post World War II, they were still putting people in camps. I mean, different types, but there was a lot of craziness going on. But the amazing thing that I got from my grandmother was, absolutely devastated, attempted suicide, and all this stuff. Was just because my grandfather was a self-made millionaire, and he had an import-export trucking company that went from Cairo to Alexandria. And, overnight they had to leave. I remember they were always talking about having a collection of Vargas paintings and jewelry and all that, having to leave everything behind. My mom was a swimming champion. She had to leave her trophies. It's the kind of stuff that, is traumatic.
Mhm.
And, but the incredible thing is, as much as, my grandfather could have said, the Arabs, did this, and we had to flee, and he always taught me that, never to judge, anyone based on the circumstances, because people are following orders. You know what I mean? Like somebody might be told, like, hey, go get this guy. This guy, that's his job. He might not really want to be doing that, but he always told me how, all his friends in Cairo, were Arabs, Jews, like it never really mattered. Like they all had, they worked with Arabs. And so I feel like from my grandfather, I always learned that union between, Arabs and Jews,
Yeah.
was always very strong, and their circumstances had absolutely nothing to do with that, and never to judge that as like, kind of oppression or some kind of a criminal expression of those people who basically kicked them out. I always wonder, like, what happened to that house,
Mm-hmm.
that my parents lived in, my grandparents lived in. And then you look at now, and then it echoes to me like, holy shit, like imagine what Palestinians are going through every day. It's the same thing. You get, you have a home somewhere where you're not even really welcome, and then all of a sudden overnight, somebody will just take your house. And so it's a very similar circumstance. And I think what I learned from him is that this is not Jews, this is not Arabs, this is very specifically um, political tactics, and so I feel like I owe my grandfather that piece of myself, that's always just loving of everybody and welcoming of everybody. And I get frustrated with politics. I just hate politics so much because it divides everybody. It divides people so much. So anyway, I digress, but all that to say, that's where my my family's from, and I've actually never been to Egypt. I'm really planning on going. My sister's been a bunch of times, but I think part of it is that trauma that
Yeah,
is inherited,
yeah, yeah.
which I saw so much from my mom and my grandmother. It's always almost been like scary to go back. Not scary like a fear of something happening, but just the DNA of it all. Like, what did I inherit from that trauma? So, but I definitely plan on going there, and checking out my roots for sure.
It's really deep, man. Living in Istanbul, like when I came here to visit, I was just like, oh man, all these amazing mosques and they're all beautiful and they're so dope and they're some of the most beautiful places on earth. But what I learned after living here is that the most ethical Muslims will only pray their Friday prayer in one of two places in the city of Istanbul. One is on the Asian side, which is where I live. There's like a great saint that's buried in my neighborhood, that was
Hmm.
a poet and a humanitarian and an educator and all this stuff. And then on the European side, a lot of the most ethical, like serious, and these are Sufis, but they'll only
Hmm.
pray their Friday prayer at the Bayazid Mosque, because Bayazid, there were certain things about him as the like sultan of the Ottoman Empire. One of the things that they always say is that he would not allow money that was taken unjustly from the people that they ruled to be used on his mosque or to be used for anything with him. He was like, if you guys are taking, like, I won't touch that money. So they're saying like the
Right.
funds that were used to build that. But the other thing about Bayazid is that when the Jewish community was exiled from certain parts of Europe and were experiencing, the Crusades and things like that, that he not only opened the doors for Jews to come to Istanbul, but he made them citizens with complete rights. And he wrote into the declaration,
Oh,
nobody can refuse them to live in any neighborhood. They can live in any neighborhood they want. Nobody can refuse them accommodations. Nobody can refuse them anything. And to
wow.
this day, like there are neighborhoods where people live and practice that they still talk about Sultan Bayezid. It's a really beautiful thing.
Wow.
And so it's one of the first
I gotta
conversations,
read up on it.
yeah, where me and you connected, where you were telling me like the history of your family, especially you go all the way back to Spain to places where the Muslims and the Jews actually lived together in a
Hmm.
lot of harmony. Of course, it's complicated. It's never as simple as all of that. But just the ability to live in these pluralistic societies. It's a trip I was thinking when you're talking about also that your grandfather not only had that part that you also have of being able to recognize beauty and to see all the layers of complexity in people, but also being an art collector.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Oh
So
yeah,
like,
yeah,
so I mean, is the whole is your part of your family story, uh, being so enamored with art and culture?
yeah. With art, absolutely. And my parents do. My dad, serious art collector. And even like furniture and just rare like French mid-century stuff and paintings and all that. So yeah, I definitely grew up. I mean, it's funny when I was a kid. I started at one point. I was being interviewed on I think it was like a Rolling Stone thing or something, and they were asking me like, what's with this obsession with Black culture? Like everything you do, you work with Black artists, you photograph Black, artists, and hundreds and hundreds of album covers that you've done, Black artists, and aside from the obvious of it being, the best artist
Mm-hmm.
ever, uh, I realized one day that when I was a kid, my dad had a collection. Like I think when I was a very little kid, he had a collection of statues by this Austrian sculptor named Goldscheider. And Goldscheider was the really like in the late 1800s, early 1900s, was pretty much the only sculptor who depicted Africans as they were.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have the huge lips,
Mm-hmm.
they didn't have the huge noses, they didn't, and some of the greatest artists like Paul Colin, like, Rob, all these people that, you know, are incredible artists, they still depicted, even the jazz posters and stuff, was very much caricatures. And that was the style. And so my dad had like the most amazing collection of Goldscheider statues of Arab soldiers and Black musicians. There was a famous one. It's like three little, kids sitting on the wall. That's like they're in museums now. They're like museum. I wish he hadn't sold all of them, which at one point he sold them to the Goldscheider family because he had one of the biggest collections.
Mm.
And so I realized, like, wait a minute, my eyes open into the world, surrounded by these statues and these paintings and Josephine Baker paintings and all these things that were all around. So no wonder, I became obsessed with that culture, and sometimes in this climate today, people will be like, oh, you're fetishizing and all this stuff. It's like, no, I'm not at all. I truly appreciate the culture and simply I'm more attracted to it because I think the music's better. I think and all the stuff that I grew up listening to, even the Beatles, the Stones, all that, it all comes from Black culture anyway. So
Absolutely.
it's just the root of it.
Yeah.
So you think of like Muddy Waters, Little Richard, all these artists. They didn't end up as rich as Jagger and all these people that I love too. But it's like, and they'll talk about it. It's not like they don't say that they were inspired by the blues and all that. But so that definitely came from that. It took me decades to realize it, and then just started my own collections. And people used to joke about me having like the world's smallest Black History Museum, when they walk into my house, because it's just so much, I have Marvin Gaye acetates and, these Prince manuscripts and statues and all kinds of jazz, paraphernalia. Like it just, I don't know, I'm so passionate about it. I've been collecting records since I was like 9 years old, vinyl. And so it's just part of who I am. It's definitely not something like jumping on a bandwagon or fetishizing a certain thing. Or.
I've heard you talk about like your early digging in hip hop or in records, and it reminds me a lot of hip
Mm-hmm.
hop producers because some of the greatest producers I know, like they walk into a place and they if they don't know the record, if they don't know the name of the artist, they base it on the cover.
Oh,
Like if the
absolutely.
cover is dope, like if the artist approved this, whoever was overseeing this thing, if the cover looks like
Yeah.
this, the chances are the music is going to be dope. And I've heard
Yeah.
you say that you
Yeah.
chose early records based on the covers and based on the depiction of like beautiful human, rich, depictions of Black artists.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I remember like the first time I saw, I was probably 10 years old when I saw the Ohio Players Honey cover.
Oh
I didn't
well,
know who the
that's
Ohio Players were, but I'm like, that gatefold, the woman covered in honey,
right,
I'm
right,
like,
right.
I'm buying this.
Oh man.
Little did I know, they were one of the greatest bands of all time. But, but most of the music I discovered early on was purely based on album covers, because I would go to the flea markets in Paris with my dad, which I still do every time I'm in Paris, every Sunday. And I would walk by these stands, and this is like early '80s, late '70s, early '80s, and so a record would be like $2-3, so I had like I would do little jobs and things. When I was 11, I started working in clothing stores exclusively to be able to buy records.
Mm.
And it's funny you say that because I've often thought, like, I bet you if I decided to be like a producer, you know what I mean? I have the ears, like I would have probably done amazing. Maybe it's never too late. I don't know. But, I have so much music in my brain and my soul, there's so much. And the art, the combination of the music and the art. And, I remember specifically like when I saw the album cover for Screaming Jay Hawkins, What That Is,
Yes.
that album
Yep.
cover. And it's like, this dude's like in a coffin sticking out.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's like on the back cover too. And what happened is I started, developing this hunger, for the music. So I started going to shows really young, you know, like I saw Fela in Paris. I think I might have been 12 years
My
old, this
God.
little club in Paris.
Crazy.
Screaming Jay Hawkins. I saw Ray Charles. Like, I mean, it was just like, this hunger. Sometimes I snuck into the show. Ray Charles, I snuck into the show. I told the guy I accidentally left and my dad was inside and I made myself cry. I was a pretty good actor too. I was
Uh,
like, my dad, I accidentally walked on my dad's inside. They must be panicking. Okay, go, go, go. And I would like sneak into the show. But that kind of thing. But it was just, all my friends are like, come play sports, come ski, come do this, come I was like, no, 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 all I want to do is just dig through record crates and later on develop that same hunger for collecting black film posters, which I have a pretty insane collection of now. Yeah, it was just an incredible journey that started so young, and then here we are, these years later. I'm 49, and I go to record conventions once in a while, and I see records that I design up on the wall
yeah.
with the crazy price because it's some limited edition. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
just so surreal.
Yeah, especially like you've done the reissues and the reissues for a lot of those really classic joints. James Brown
Yeah,
and
yeah,
Marvin Gaye and
mm,
Bob Marley and
yeah.
all of that stuff. Something I want to ask you, brother, is like, what is so for a long time, France has been a place that really seems to understand Black American music and culture, and actually show respect to the artists themselves. I have my own theory for why that might be, but why do you think that the French are able to understand that connection between the deep, profound, rich humanity of the artist themselves, the genius of the human being? Whereas in America, we have to separate it. So it's like, yeah, we'll
Right.
take your music, but this is just comes from
But
some.
drink from that water fountain.
Right,
But we'll
right,
we'll
right.
come see your show.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
just some primitive person making up these accidents, you know what I'm saying? And whereas in Paris,
Right.
it's like, no, Nina Simone is a genius, like what?
Right. Right. Right.
I have my theory about it, but I'm curious to hear from you. Why do you think that that's possible in Paris specifically? In Europe at large, but I mean, France specifically seems to have an understanding for that.
I think there was something of an inferiority complex
Mm,
where they just thought we can. I know I experienced that myself as a kid. Like, we're never going to be able to be this cool. We're never going to be able to be this good. I mean, yes, French people are cool. They're sitting there with the croissant, the cigarette, and the little dachshund. I have one of those now. Like
dope.
you're just sitting at a cafe, with the camera on the edge of the table and the most beautiful woman next to you. But there was something about I think two inherent things. I think there's I was talking about DNA before. I do believe you can inherit guilt through DNA.
Okay.
I do
Yep.
believe you can inherit, so the whole
Yes.
colonialism aspect of everything, French were big on that. You know what I mean? And again, in World War II, you think about it, the French were collaborators. Like, you know what I mean? They would be like, hey, these Jews are living upstairs or they're hiding under,
That's right.
there's a lot of really like discussing history as there is here, obviously in America, and but I think you have this thing in you that's like, oh my God, this is so amazing, and then yet in our history we oppressed these people, we killed these people, we butchered these people, and for greed, which is it's always about greed and power. So I know that's a strange take on it, but I do feel like there's something to that mixed with that inferiority complex where you realize like maybe the reason historically our people did this is because they felt inferior,
Yeah.
because they felt
Yes.
afraid,
Yep.
you know?
Yes.
So I think that 1950s, 60s, my parents' generation
Mm-hmm.
in Paris, they went to the Club Saint Germain, all these jazz clubs, Bill Bouquet, all those places. They went there every weekend. They saw all these amazing jazz artists, because it was that generation that told their parents, like, we don't want to be like you. Hey, if I want to, if I want to hang out with this black dude from New York, I'm going to do it. It was the rebellious era.
Mm.
And so I think that generation, whoever, if they were teenagers in the 50s and 60s, they basically were like, we love this, we accept this, we're open to this, we want to be part of this, and screw you guys that rejected all this. So it opened the whole world to the culture that's there today. And then a lot of African artists also, we talk about Fela and people like that, and the Tony Allens, we're always bigger in France.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to me, Fela became popular in the US in like the 2000s. You know
Absolutely.
what I
Yeah,
mean?
man.
It's like there's so many artists like that who you went to Paris, and that's why so many artists went to France first. Like Lenny Kravitz is like, I worked with for a long time. He's like my brother. They sent him to Europe first. He broke in France. And Ben Harper, same thing. Like a lot of artists where the labels be like, okay, America might not really get this like half white, half black, half Jewish, half Christian music, the musician thing. Let's send you there. They'll get it.
Yeah,
And it always
immediately.
works.
We are all ready. We
Yeah.
are plug and play.
Whereas
We're ready to go.
exactly. So I think the U.S. follows these formats, and it's more like if this doesn't fit in this category, we don't really know what to do with it, so we'll pass. So I think guys like my dear friend Jeff Aroff, who signed Lenny, that was a brilliant thing to say, and Ben, Harper, like there's a brilliant thing to say, hey, let's start in Europe, and then you're going to get big there, and then they'll know about you here. It's like a backwards system.
Yeah.
You know,
So you moved to the States in '87 and
87 September
to
87.
LA
Yep,
first, and then you don't go to New York
LA
until you're
first.
like a young adult, like ready to try to make something happen for yourself.
So I moved to New York. No, I mean I was 19 or 20, I think, when I moved to New York to go to NYU.
Mm.
And so I spent 3 years in NYU, and then started just working because I was like, oh shit, this is New York. Like, you got to survive here. So I got a job as a graphic designer. There's a company called Gray and Gustafson, and they were like a branding, like fashion branding. So they would like come up with brands for like JCPenney's and Macy's and whoever. And I came through with a completely fake portfolio
Right.
because I didn't have a portfolio. You know what I mean?
So
I
you
was like,
created. So you went
eh,
in and created like, all right, I haven't designed anything yet for this artist, but if I did, this is what it would look like. And if I hadn't done this brand yet, but if I did, this is what it'd be like. But it was all the
right.
top brands, right?
Right, but what's funny is that I didn't tell them that it wasn't real
You just
stuff.
give them
You
the
know what I mean?
portfolio, like, here's what I did
I,
with.
I just show up with the portfolio, and the guy's like, "How old are you?" I'm like, whatever I was, like 20, and 19, 20, and I'm like, and he's like, "And you've done all this?" And he's flipping through it, and Marvin Gaye and James Brown and Prince, and you know, I mean, like
But
everything.
some of
You know
those
what I
joints
mean?
did get
And
used for.
Roy,
Didn't bootleggers like have you like? Didn't you do like small runs for bootleg joints?
yeah, so I met these guys when I was 16 in LA, and I was always like designing my own mixtapes. Like I would make mixtapes for friends, and so I had this series called the Funk Bible when I was in New York, and it
Dope.
would be like these, kind of like mega mix, funk things. And I had heard that when Prince did the Black album, he referred to it as the Funk Bible. I actually heard that later on, which was kind of funny,
Amazing.
and kindred spirits, I guess. Not that I would ever be on that level, but a good idea. And so there used to be like these really cool mixes. You'd have like deep, funk, and mix with like some obscure like Roy Ayers stuff, and everything, but it wouldn't be anything obvious. It wouldn't be like
It's not
the
flashlight.
compilation.
Yeah.
Right. It would just be deeper. I mean, it would be Maggot Brain instead of Flashlight. You
Right.
know what I mean? Which again, that became famous. That became hip later on. And so or like Standing on the Verge of Getting It On. Stuff like that wasn't really like known to the masses yet.
Even Roy
The
Ayers
fans
in
knew
that
it.
time, like Roy Ayers has become a household name for
Oh yeah,
anybody that knows his music. But I mean, when
yeah,
we first heard I'm maybe 5 years younger than you, but when we first heard Roy Ayers being sampled on Tribe Called Quest records and stuff, that was a new find for a lot of people.
Right, right. And that's the thing when I was talking about earlier. There's so many times I felt like, man, somebody should sample this. Like I would hear like a crazy break beat, in some obscure, record, and I'd be like, oh man, this would be like a great sample. I always thought that way. I just never like acted on it. You know what I mean? But um, so yeah, so I would make these, mixtapes, and little by little, people would be like, this should be like available commercially. Like this is amazing, and crazy coincidence. Just 2 days ago at the Blue Note Jazz Festival, um, I'm walking backstage, and this woman stops me. And this woman named Lisa Cortez. I don't know if you know her, but she used to have a label called Loose Cannon at Mercury, and she's a director now. Like she's directed a bunch of big stuff and producer, and I hadn't seen her in like 20 years, but she gave me like my first logo design gig. And when she heard my mixtapes, she was like, you need to hook up with this friend of mine at Polygram named Harry Weinger. And basically, like when we met up, it was like love at first sight, because I had all this rare shit and I was doing all this stuff. And so he hired me to start working on like the Funk Essentials series, which was a big thing at Polygram back in the 90s,
Yeah, I had a bunch of
And
those.
so those were, yeah, so those were like my first gigs, and the first one I did was like the Ballads collection.
Hmm.
And it was like Confunction, Parliament, Cameo. I can't even remember all of them now, but it was a bunch of them. And I remember when the woman from Polygram told me, like, okay, send an invoice for whatever it was, like $7,500, and I was like, wait, I'm getting paid for this? Like, you know what I mean? I had no idea. I just thought like this is what I do anyway. You know what I mean? I used to do all that stuff. I used to design them. I used to hand them to friends, and so it was like a shocking revelation that I was like, wait, I can do this and pay my bills. You know what I mean? And I was still at NYU at the time. And actually, I was like right at the end of NYU, I think. So that started my career as a designer, because I had met these guys and they were like, hey, I like this thing you did. Can you design a Prince cover? And I'd be like, oh, I'm 16 years old, right? So I'm just like, I don't even really know. I knew I collected bootlegs. I know what bootlegs were, but I didn't know the laws and the things. I was like, sure, I'll design this Prince cover. And next thing you know, these bootlegs that are to this day, like some of the most classic Prince bootlegs, I had designed the cover at like 16 or 17 years old. You know what I mean? There was like one called Crucial, Crystal Ball, Cookie Jar, and it was like these same guys doing it. And they used to pay me in CDs. Like they would just give me product. Like I didn't get any money or anything like that. And I actually got to told Prince that once at a party. He gave me a really dirty look, and he was like he gave me the nod, like, okay, you were
That's
16,
you, yeah,
but yeah, he was like, yeah, those were a
yeah.
nuisance.
That was a
You
problem.
know what I mean? Like, yeah,
What's
but
crazy is like so much of hip hop production, like these great producers that we look up to and revere as some of the greatest ever in the culture. What I didn't realize later, and because I'm in the Midwest and much younger than these dudes, is that there was this series of bootlegs called Ultimate Breaks and Beats, where these guys were like going and
right,
finding the joints that everybody was looking for and putting them all out on
right,
compilation records. And those compilations would come out, and then 3 months later all of the stuff that was on those compilations would end up being the big hip hop records of the time. So
right,
they were like
right.
directly
It's
supplying
amazing.
them. And like
Yeah,
those funk joints that you're talking about, I know directly that those things were sampled as well. I started noticing that because those were available to us at the same time. And I would get them and
right,
be like, yo, I'm going to sample this. And I had older friends that were like, no, because it's on this compilation, watch somebody sample.
right,
And a lot of
right,
those did end
right.
up getting sampled,
Yeah,
6 months, a year
yeah.
later. That's amazing.
Yeah, and it's always an incredible feeling when you hear something. I was talking about this yesterday, like not that it's the same kind of music, but like being like a Nick Drake fan in high school, and I had a friend, my friend Todd Hirsch, who's like obsessed with Nick Drake too, and it's like we're like really into it. And then years later, you have a Volkswagen commercial, and all of a sudden, like the whole world's listening to Nick Drake, which is amazing for his legacy and his catalog. But it was always like, man, I've been trying to tell you guys shit for like decades. You know what I mean? And it was the same thing with music, like Shuggy Otis. Shuggy Otis is a perfect example. Like I was obsessed with Shuggy
Oh
Otis,
yeah.
and I had the records, Freedom Flight and Inspiration Information. They were like the impossible records to find back then because they didn't sell.
Yeah.
They weren't hits. Weekend after weekend, traveling looking for records, and then finally you find that record, and it's just like the greatest feeling in the world, and years and years later, all of a sudden, somebody samples it, and then it becomes, all the DJs start playing it, which is cool too.
It's amazing you talk about like these really dope artists that are obscure forever and then they show up in a something corny and mainstream like a car commercial and then suddenly
Right.
they're known. Yeah, so everybody that's been in a mall in the last like 30 years knows that like one of the big unavoidable ubiquitous things in in culture and being in a mall is American Eagle. And I just found out about you recently that you designed the logo they
It
still
gets who
use.
designed that logo.
Yeah, man. So you talk about like, the all the flyness of the like the mixture of art and culture and fashion, but wasn't that one of your first like big paying gigs?
That's my only job ever. Like as far as like 9 to 5, I worked for American Eagle Outfitters as a senior packaging and product designer, something like that. I still have the card somewhere. Now, mind you, this is like 1996, so I'm 23. I show up in Columbus, Ohio. Who would have known that Ohio later in my life would become such an important part of my life?
Crazy because of
That's
Dave.
another. That's another. Yeah, because of Dave. And that's when I went to Columbus, Ohio, I assumed that'd be the last time in my life I went to Ohio. And I show up for this meeting. Somehow, I was freelancing, doing T-shirts and stuff for a bunch of companies. Somebody got wind of me doing this stuff, and also my music stuff. So, and just I want to go back to because it's kind of connected. So that portfolio that I had done for the Gray and Gustafson interview, you know, had all these amazing album covers, T-shirts, logos, and the guy at the end of the interview is like, how old are you? And I'm like, I don't know, I was 19 or 20 at the time, and he says, so I'm trying to understand like how have you done all this? And I was like, what do you like the work? And he's like, no, it's amazing. I love it. I was like, so does it matter you know? And he's like, well, on a superficial level, I guess it does, and he goes like, you wouldn't like come to a job interview with all fake designs. And I was like, well, it's not fake, is it? It's right here in front of you.
Hmm.
So, okay, I didn't do it for for the Stones or for Prince or for James Brown or for, Jimmy Cliff and whoever I had in there. But you like the design, right? So the guy was like, man, you got balls, you're hired.
Yeah.
It was literally those were the words. He's like, I don't even care. Like to do that, to come in with that kind of cojones, you're hired. And so flash forward to 96, American Eagle, they had seen some of this stuff, somehow, people were passing around or whatever, like check this guy's workout, and this guy calls me, I walk in and they're like, we're really interested in this music aspect that you bring to the table.
Hmm.
And I said, well, why don't we do collaborations with other brands, magazines and things and do compilations that are like the American Eagle Outfitters compilation. I was working with this guy named Michael Leedy, who was my boss at the time. And he was like, yeah, that's kind of what we're planning on doing. So then that was like, if you buy 2 pairs of jeans, blah blah blah, you get a free CD, and you would have whatever's going on at that time from specific labels, and that was a completely new thing at the time, as far as I know. I had never seen it, and so people started like going to people that normally wouldn't go to American Eagle would start being like, hey, I want this
Because they
CD, and
want
then what
that
I started
music.
doing. Yeah, so what I started doing is I would do like an exclusive thing, like I had this friend named Savori, who was a great artist at an album out on Polydor. Like, let's do an unreleased take, like a thing from your album that's only available in this American Eagle thing, and then like that was the theory behind it. So when I went to the interview, the guy was like, they made me like an offer for a job, and like, hey, would you come in? We have these amazing offices in Bryant Park. You have your own office, blah blah blah. And I'm 23. I'm like, no, well, you'd have to double that salary and then I'd consider it. It's so obnoxious, you know what I
Right.
mean? And the guy's like, what the fuck have you done? Have you had to work in this industry? I was like, well, no, but you know, but I've been doing, yeah, I've been freelancing on stuff. So they agreed to my terms. They like they kind of went like, okay, this guy's nuts, but okay, fine, you get the salary you want. And you know, I started working like a dog, and I started going to Japan all the time, which I loved. You know, I started going to Hong Kong every 6 weeks,
Mm.
and also I remember like in the interview, like obnoxiously being like, by the way, I fly first class. I probably had never flown first class at that time. But you know, I'm like, by the way, like if I travel, I fly first class. They're like, you know how expensive first class is? I was like, well, it's just you know, it's just what I do. You know, I wish I was this obnoxious today, but I can't. You know,
Crazy.
so it was like that kind of thing. So I started doing all this amazing traveling and started, you know, basically rebranded them. And with this guy Michael, that was kind of his whole thing. And he was great, very talented. But we are like, with this eagle logo thing, that's tacky, let's change that. This stuff, the stores look really tacky, let's change that. So we just kind of got into, you know, that whole rebranding mentality, and I just started doing also all the t-shirts, redid all the packaging. And it's funny because you look at like Double RL, the Ralph Lauren brand, which is like my favorite clothing brand,
Yeah, I know it is.
and it's really like in that vein of what Double RL is still doing. I was kind of going for that cooler Americana thing. Like everything was like, you know, let's move away from this like 80s looking shit and go into this 50s looking stuff. You know, it was way cooler in the 40s and 50s and nostalgia. Yeah, so you know, so that was like that phase of my career. And then I ended up, like I was saying, like really when I'm talking about, I always worked like a dog, but when you work like a dog for something that you're truly passionate about, like the stuff with Dave now, or you know, this Prince stuff or whatever it is, Lenny, that's not work. You know what I mean? That's okay. But I started realizing, like, man, you know, my parents are designers. Is this really the industry I want to be in? The same industry? Is this like, is my heart in it? Not really. And I would see like, you know, certain like bosses would have like meltdowns over like a stitch being a little sideways, which is perfectionism. I respect that. But I wasn't about to like have a meltdown about a sideways stitch on a sweater. You know what I mean? And I just realized like, I don't want to be stuck 20 years from now doing this. I'll probably be very successful. Nike tried to recruit me back in those days, and I was like, holy shit, that's crazy. And they offered me like a really good salary. And even my ex, Rebecca, at the time was like supportive of me not doing it, but
Mm.
she was always great for that. Like if something came up and it was like, you know, how am I going to turn down this salary that's like more money than I'll ever make? But it's not where my heart
She's like,
is. You know
that's
what I
not
mean?
you though. You know,
Right. And
and
she was,
speaking of her, and speaking of like wrapping up this like corporate weird part of your career, so you were planning on you have this big collection of black exploitation, like all the great like black movie posters,
mhm,
and in your mind you have an idea that you're going to do a book around all of this stuff just
right.
so that you can present
Yep.
like all of this really dope stuff to the world. And there's this
Yep.
whole like tradition of the way that those movies were marketed, you know, like the audio stuff that was on the radio, the like the ads for them, you know what I'm saying? Like you
Yeah. The
can
radio
search those
spots.
and
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying, Jack
Yep.
so and so is Pam Grier, da, da, da. And
Yeah.
so then you
She's
read.
brown sugar and spice, but if you don't treat her nice, she'll put you on
And
a.
Rudy Ray Moore did
Damn, I
his
forgot
own.
that one.
Like he did his own joints.
Yeah.
This is Rudy Ray Moore.
Yes,
How come?
I'm Dolomite.
Oh man. So you have this whole collection, and you read in the newspaper, like when Jackie Brown comes out, that Quentin Tarantino is about to steal your idea,
So,
or he has the
not.
same idea, but it's you know you have the idea, but he's Quentin Tarantino.
I'm an American Eagle. This friend, you know, in New York, this friend in LA sends me a LA Weekly article about Quentin Tarantino's working on this movie, Jackie Brown,
Mm.
and you know they're about to wrap production, whatever, and is planning to release a book of black exploitation film posters, and I'm like devastated, right? I'm like freaking out because I'd already started designing my own. I'd started writing all this stuff. And I'm like, man, you cannot compete with Quentin Tarantino after Pulp Fiction. This is like after Pulp Fiction. That's the last thing he put out. You know what I mean? So there's no way. So I literally, I'm like a little kid at home sulking every day. I want this was going to be my thing. And Rebecca is like, well, then contact Tarantino. And I'm like, what the fuck? What are you talking about? Get away from me. You know what I mean?
Right. You
Like,
don't
leave me
just call
alone. Like,
Quentin
you can't,
Tarantino on the phone.
you can't contact. And again, Pulp Fiction is the last thing he put
Yeah, it's the
out. You know what I
biggest
mean?
thing in the country
It's
at the
like the
time.
biggest thing in the world. So
Yeah.
I'm like, you don't understand. You know, da, da, da. And every day she was like, have you reached out to Tarantino's offices yet? Have you tried to find him? And I'm like, to the point that like I was like, okay, just leave me alone. Please stop saying this. I'm going to pick up the phone and call just so you can stop. You know what I mean? Just so you can see that I'm going to pick up the phone. They're going to tell me to fuck off. And then we're done. You don't have to ask me if I called Tarantino. You know what I mean? And she was like, fine. So I find a band apart that was this production company over on Beverly and Laurel. And so I find the phone number. I call, speak to this woman. She's like, I'm like, yes, hi, I'm working on a book. I hear, Mr. Tarantino's planning to put on a book on blaxploitation film posters. Click, okay. I call again, well, I'd like to leave a message for Mr. Tarantino, you know, basically for like days. They were just like, well, sorry, but no, and then I had like that little obnoxious part I was talking about from the interviews kind of came to me, and I decided to call, and I said, hold on, before you hang up, just hear me out. She's like, okay. I was like, I just want to let you know my name is Mathieu Bitton. I'm from France, blah blah blah. I know you hang up on me every day, but as it turns out, I have posters that I have the only copies of, and I just want to let you know that when I do meet Mr. Tarantino and his book is out and he finds out he could have had these posters in the book, you're going to get fired. Thank you very much. Bye bye. And I hung up, right? And I'm like shaking, like, what the fuck did I just
Right.
do,
You just jumped out the window
So
for
it's,
real.
yeah, so I hung up from being nervous, not even to try to hang up, but I was like, oh my God, that's not really who I am, I think I called back and the woman's like, okay, give me your number, like very like, oh my God, like just give me your number already. Like, just so annoyed with me. Like I was just like a gnat flying in her face for days.
Hmm.
And I give her my number, nothing. I don't hear anything for like 2 weeks. And one day I'm in the car, I get a call like, hey, my name is Jerry Martinez. I got your number from so and so, and apparently you're quite intent on, talking to us. And I was like, well, who are you? And he's like, well, I'm the guy, making the book for Quentin. And I find out, Jerry's the guy who like does all the graphics, like in Pulp Fiction. What's her name? Esmeralda, the cab driver. She's got it's Big Jerry's taxi company, and that's an illustration of
Yes.
Jerry, who's the guy calling me, right?
Yeah.
So he's Jerry,
Crazy.
and so he's since I think Reservoir Dogs worked with Quentin. They used to work at the video store together, so they go far back. And Jerry's like super like nonchalant, like, man, like, so what do you got? I was like, well, I'd like to talk about this project because I was working on my own book. And he's like, oh, well, we're done with the book. And I'm like, oh, man, I like, but I do have some really rare posters. Like, for example, I think I have the only copy of Melvin Van Peebles' French La Permission, which is the story of a 3-day fast.
Crazy.
And I've never seen another copy of it.
Crazy.
And the bus shelter poster. So it's like 47 by
Oh my
63 inches. It's
God.
huge. And I've, so I'm telling him this, and I was like, even the biggest collectors that I've been collecting since the 50s borrow this poster for exhibitions. And so he's like, oh yeah, I've never seen them. Well, we're done, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, listen, Jerry, like I work here. I work at American Eagle Outfitters. I've got a very good steady job, a very good salary. I will quit tomorrow if I can come work with you on this
Your
on this
American
book.
Eagles in New York, and these
Yeah,
dudes are in
they're
L.A.
in LA.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my mom's still living in LA. So and the guy like kind of paused when I said that, and then Jerry's like, okay, well, we'll be in touch, and he like hangs up. I was like, fuck, I screwed up. Like I was too pushy. I said da 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 that I would quit my job. It probably freaked them out.
Hmm.
Don't hear from them again. I was probably like crying in my couch, looking at my posters, like I screwed this up, and then like a week later, as you know things work in this universe, um, Jerry calls me and he's with this other guy, and he's like, so tell me about the posters, and I'm like hearing this dude next to him, and the guy is going like, Pamela Greer is Foxy Brown, you know, and I'm like, that voice sounds
That's
familiar,
just
you
in
know.
the background.
And he's like, in the car, they're driving in the car, and he's like, so tell us again, you know, da, 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 what do you got? And I said, I said, oh, I've got this thing, I've got this really rare, Isaac Hayes. But yeah, I'm just trying to think of things that I know are not, you can't really find. Blackenstein, I have the like two styles of Black Frankenstein and Blackenstein. They're impossible to find, like literally. And the guy's like, all right, well, were you serious about leaving your job to come to LA to work on this? Because, we're almost halfway done with the book. And I was like, oh, last
It
time
was done.
you said they were
Now
done
you're
with it was
halfway
done.
done. All right.
So now you're
The door
halfway
is
done. So
opening
I
a
was like,
little more and more each time.
yeah. So I'm like, all right, Jerry, so what do you want? What would you like me to do? Well, he's like, well, how about we have a meeting on Friday? This was like Tuesday or Wednesday. I'm in New York, right? Like, let's say Friday around noon. And then he's like, I'm sitting here with Quentin, like it's kind of, I was like, I knew that was Quentin in the background,
And that was
and
him
so he's like,
recreating the voices from the
that,
radio ads
that was him doing radio spots as we
from
were talking
memory.
about each movie we were talking about. Yeah. And so I'm like, this is a crazy moment, you remember I'm 23 years old, right? Or like, so this is not like jaded, I mean? This is like crazy. So I called my boss. I'm like, listen, I got an emergency in LA. I have to go to LA. Sorry for the short notice, but I'm taking a red eye on Thursday night, or whatever. I'm going to LA. And so I go to LA. I show up at the offices, in Beverly, and I go to the front desk. And I'm here to meet Jerry Martinez, and they're like, no, I don't see any appointments for Jerry today, and I don't think he's here. And I was like, well, no, he told me 12 o'clock Friday. I just came from LA, and they're like, no, I don't see us. I was like, well, can you call him? They're like, okay, well, have a seat. So I'm like sitting there for like 2 hours. And then finally, like, dude walks in, looks like Newman and Seinfeld, and he had like a cowboy hat on. He really looked like Newman and Seinfeld. And he walks in, he's like, Matthew? I'm like, yeah. He's like, what are you doing here? I'm like, you told me we'd meet, he's like, well, I didn't think you'd come. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, that was like 2 days ago or 3 days ago. I was like, well, yeah, but, I take this very seriously. And he's like, oh, shit. Well, sorry, man. I don't really have anything like to talk about. And I'm like, well, I'm here. Let's talk about this book. So he goes, well, all right. Well, here, follow me to my office. And he's like, so you're a graphic designer? I was like, yeah, yeah. And, I'm also like a big collector, as I told you. And so he's like, all right, well, here's a computer. This is literally how it happened. Like, go to his office. Here's a computer. I brought a bunch of posters with me, press books, like all stuff, that I could like show him. And by whatever divine intervention or whatever it was, I decided to bring a bunch of Isaac Hayes stuff, from the movies he did, The Three Tough Guys, Truck Turner, Black Moses of Soul. I just brought all this different stuff. And he goes, well, why don't you do like a concept chapter design on Isaac Hayes, because I guess we had talked on the phone, but he didn't know I brought all this stuff. So I'm like, he's like, here's the scanner, here's the computer, here's like some old school shitty digital camera, like, go ahead, I'll be back at the end of the day. I'm like, whoa, this is really strange, like to be put on the spot like that, And so I was like, okay, can I see what you guys have done so far for the book? And he's like, well, we haven't really like done anything yet.
I mean,
And I'm
yeah,
like, wait,
that joint went from being done to being half done to like we
yeah,
haven't even
yeah.
started.
So I spend the day, you know, in the stranger's office. It was also like Miramax offices. And all these people keep walking in, like, who are you? Are you supposed to be here? I was like, yes, please call Jerry. It was so uncomfortable. So, but then at the end of the day, Jerry comes back and he's like, starts looking. It was like Quark Express, I was laying out the stuff, and he's like, oh, this is pretty good. Well, as fate would have it, we had a designer working on this book. Like they had worked on the cover and some other stuff, but they didn't really have much. They had like a couple chapter, ideas like design. And the guy was also working on the Jackie Brown movie poster, and apparently had like, this is the 96, no, 97. So he had like a blog, this is like early internet days. And the guy decided to post like a concept art for Jackie Brown on his blog. And of course, the Miramax saw it, caught wind of it. They had to fire him. Coincidentally, that's the day I called.
Amazing.
So yeah, so they tell me that. It was like, I didn't know any of this was going on. So he's like, well, we kind of thought it was weird that you reached out like the day, that whatever you said got our attention was the day this guy, was let go. And I'm like, holy shit. So he's like, well, how would you like to work on the book? And I said, it's a dream come true. I would love to. So quit my job at American Eagle with very short notice. I felt really bad, but it was like, maybe a week's notice instead of 2 weeks notice, but I was like, listen, this is opportunity of a lifetime. I think you do the same, And so I go back, start working on the book, and uh, get invited to this cast and crew screening, and meet Pam Grier, meet everybody. Like, I'm just like, what world am I living in? This is completely crazy. And they start the projections. So I start watching the movie, and all of a sudden it's like Robert Forster. It's like the Max Cherry, the bondsman, the bail bondsman. And that was my mom's boyfriend in the '80s. Like, they dated for like 4 or 5 years. So he was like my
Crazy.
stepdad, right?
Crazy. Crazy.
So, and I hadn't seen him since '86 maybe.
So he knew you as a little
And
boy,
so
as a kid.
yeah, so he knew me. I have pictures of us, all this stuff, and so I'm like, the whole movie, I'm freaking out, like, oh my God, like Robert's in a Tarantino movie, and holy shit, I'm here. So movie ends, everybody's clapping, and I see Robert's like right there. So I go over to him and I say, hey, Robert, how you doing? And he's like, hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you. I was like, well, we've met before. He's like, we have. He's like, you do look familiar. I was like, yeah, Mathieu, Bitton's son. And he's just like, oh my God, he just hugged me like, like a long lost son. It was just the most amazing. And may he rest in peace. He just passed away
Yeah.
recently.
Yeah.
And luckily we had like rekindled, this relationship. So we would get together from time to time. I saw him not too long before he passed, but that was just another kind of incredible, the webbing of life and destiny.
If you've been listening to the Travelers Podcast, you know that from the very beginning, we've been supported by the Zakat Foundation. Zakat, Z-A-K-A-T, is the pillar of the Islamic faith that deals with giving back. All of the wisdom traditions, all the spiritual traditions, they all have this element of sharing, of giving, of loving, of serving. And Zakat Foundation operates all over the world. It's a Muslim-led organization, but they don't proselytize and they don't only help Muslims. And they're just creative leaders in every field that they go into. It's really important to Zakat Foundation that every area of the world that they seek to help and benefit the people there, that they want to do it in community with the folks that they're helping. That the people that are being afflicted by these particular circumstances, it's not because they are somehow lesser human beings that they end up in the situation, the conditions that they're in. Oftentimes, we all find ourselves in need of other human beings to connect with, to share with, to search for solutions with. And so Zakat Foundation, when they go into an area, they say the people that are being afflicted are the best ones to solve their problems. They're the experts. It's not that we're coming in with all these goods and resources and platform and all this stuff and saying like, we're here to bless you. But the reality is that these are human beings that are dignified, that have history, that have culture, that are dynamic, that there are layers to and nuances to the political realities and to the lived experience. And so they're going to guide us on how to deliver goods, resources, help, service, love, humanity, charity, all of the above. So when they go into a place, they partner with the people there. And what I've seen over and over again in working with Zakat Foundation is that they're just very deeply committed to being creative about solving problems and the shared humanity of us all. If you go to Zakat US, You can see them on social media. Also, Zakat Foundation of America on Facebook. But you can see all the amazing work that they do in different walks of life in different areas of the world, and check it out. It's all really beautiful. One of the things about this time that we live in is we're profoundly isolated. We're cut off from people, and we tend to, in that isolation, sometimes just taking in social media, taking in the news, taking in all of the catastrophes and calamities and horrors and nightmares that are being visited upon people all around the world. I mean, a deep depression can set in. And I think all of us are experiencing that on some level. Also, a type of anxiety can set in as well. There's nothing at all weird about being, experiencing depression and anxiety. But one of the main ways to combat this and to help ourselves is to reach out and to serve other people and to share what we have, because it allows us to be connected with people. It allows us to have a sense of like, there is something that I can do about this. And also, it really reminds us of the fact that whatever we're experiencing, whatever we're going through, all of us are going through hardships. I mean, there's not an economy in the world right now that's not in crisis. Families are in financial crisis. It's one of the reasons that I live in Istanbul, Turkey, is because just some of the financial pressure of being an independent artist who I'm not brand new and I never had a hit record. My fans are very generous and what have you. All of you all are really amazing. But the reality is that the financial pressures of living in America were just too great. So one of the reasons we live in this country is that. But finding a way to give to others really reminds me and reminds us that I do have something that I can share. As difficult as things are, $5 at Zakat Foundation buys a person somewhere in the world who is hungry a hot meal. $50 takes care of all of the needs. $50 a month takes care of all of the needs of an orphan somewhere in the world. And in the orphan program, not one single cent of your $50 goes to advertising or overhead or salaries or admin or any of that stuff. 100% of the orphan relief program goes directly to orphans. So go to Zakat Foundation, look through their social media, check out their website, and find a way to give back. Because I promise that it really does make a difference in the life of other people, and it also makes a difference in the lives of the people that are sharing. Really grateful to be partnered with Zakat Foundation. My brother Justin Mashouf is a b-boy. He's Iranian American. He's a documentary filmmaker. He's an artist and a dad. And he comes from a people that understand the relationship with nature and the relationship with place and the relationship with ancestry and with lineage and with inheritance, that all of these things are profoundly important, that we can't be full human beings without these connections, that all of these things are related to each other. And so he developed this line of really beautiful men's hair care, grooming products, particularly focus on beards. And he calls it Mystic Man, which means that we want to be men. We want to be people of genuine love and service and virtue. We want to be protectors. We want to be maintainers. We want to be lovers. We want to be students. We want to be teachers. We want to be people who have the ability to be warrior poets, to be strong when it's time to be strong, to be gentle when it's time to be gentle, to be tender when it's time to be tender. That we're the people that show up in the moment, servants of whatever the moment requires. And this is what it is to be a mystic man, to be driven, to be, present in the experiences that are going on in the physical world and to respond to them properly, but to be driven by a sense of the unseen, the world of meaning, the world of virtue, the world of beauty, the world of love, that this is what ultimately animates us. And that mystical connection between us and all human beings and all living things, and ultimately with the divine. That this is, when we say Assalamu alaikum, may you be whole. It also means may creation be at whole. May you be at one with creation itself. And may you be a witness to the divine. All of this is in the idea of Mystic Man. And so if you go to mystic-man.com, you can check out their products. You see that this stuff that Justin produces and that his people produce, it comes from specifically the sacred cedar that come from the part of the world that Justin is from, from Iran, from Persia. And cedar is something that is a product that is something in creation that has tremendous healing ability, that has healing power. And so in bringing that into our grooming products, I mean, it's beautiful. It provides healing and health and growth, for our beards and for our hair. But it also beautifies, it smells amazing. So it beautifies the things that we do. And all of these things that we talk about on this podcast, particularly with our sponsors, is an attempt to take the things that we do every single day and elevate them through intention, through attention, through beauty, and to take that, to elevate them from things that are mundane, things that might be thoughtless and pointless that we don't even think about. You get up every day, you got to do these certain things. But by putting intention into them, we actually make them a sacred act that reminds us of the world of virtue and beauty and meaning and all of that. So head to mystic-man.com. When you get to the checkout area for the whatever the dope stuff is that you pick up there, put in the code TRAVELERS and you'll get a little something off it because we're cool like that. Much love to Justin Mashroof and much love to Mystic Man. I hear you talk a lot about, man, passion and destiny. That like
Yeah,
really
yeah.
the key to your success is really, the passion that like these are things that you care about deeply. Like whether you worked in this field or not, like you would go to bed at night and wake up in the morning and thinking about obsessing over, art and the people that created and the music and the way that things look and design and fashion and culture and the way that all of these things come
Mhm.
together. So like passion is absolutely, and then, we talked earlier about the fact that you never sleep and like you're obsessing over every,
Yeah.
detail and showing up for the having the vision, but then also the fact that just, man, the creator's got to be on your side. There's got to be a destiny element to it as well.
It's funny because it's something I always like resist so much, just innately. But the whole spiritual aspect of it.
Hmm.
But there's just too many times where I'm just like, okay, how do you explain this? You know what I mean? Like I could tell you 100 stories where anybody would be like, bullshit. You know what I mean? Like that's not possible. It's like I remember even like, I'm a big fan of the Mac. And Max Julian,
Hmm.
and also wrote Cleopatra
That's
Jones,
right.
and I was always talking about, man, that this dude must be like, who knows if he's still, I didn't even know if he was still around, where he was, all this stuff, and like was talking about him with a friend of mine. I just found this Egyptian the Mac poster, which nobody had ever seen before, like from a guy who bought a theater in Egypt, and in the basement were all these posters. So I bought all these black, all the black film posters, and 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 like just after I got this Egyptian poster, I'm like going to Whole Foods in Studio City here in LA on Coldwater Canyon, and I'm like sitting there. There's a dude in a safari hat with like a gray fro sticking out in front of me, like in line to check out, and I'm like, why do I feel like I know? Do you know what I mean? Why do I feel like this person is somebody that I know or want to know?
Yeah.
And then I literally was like, excuse me, like, I don't have a reason to like interrupt this guy's day. He turns around and Max Julian.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, I got to tell you something. Like, not only am I a fan, but I have things you need to see. Like, and we became friends. Like, you invited me over to his house. He showed me like the coat from the Mac, which is now at the museum, in DC, African American Museum. And we would like hang out. He'd come over to my house, met the kids. It was just like, and this would just happen over and over again.
Yeah.
Quincy is another one, but it was just like this kind of, Prince being the original one that I met, as a pretty much as as a teenager, in Paris. But it just like has this thread of like, you know, sometimes like it happened this weekend where like younger photographers or designers will be like, hey man, I want to do what you're doing. And what's the quickest way to get, I was like, you just said the very wrong
Right.
words, quickest way. There is no
Quick
quickest
got
way.
nothing to
What
do
I mean?
with it.
Nothing happens. Yeah.
We live
It's
this, we
like, this is
breathe this,
like,
we eat it, sleep it. This
yeah,
is who we would be whether or not
exactly.
we got these opportunities. This is who we were going to be no matter what.
Exactly. You know, like my girlfriend Grace is like, she worries about me because she's like, I need you to sleep more. Like, I'm worried about, you know, but I was like, well, you have to understand, like, even if I tried to sleep, you know what I mean? My brain is just going and going and going. So, yes, sometimes I'll pass out and sleep a normal sleep, you know, but most of the time, my mind is like, okay, this is what I'm going to do for this box set, or this is what I'm going to do for this Dave album, where I see this vision, or you know, and as I get older, I start to think like the word inspiration actually is a spiritual thing that I never
Absolutely.
realized was a
Absolutely.
spiritual thing, because I resist that. Like I said, I resist the spiritual thing so much. But then, you know, you experience things like, it's so funny. I remember when you and I met at Chappelle Summer Camp, and all these artists were there. I mean, everybody was there, right? Letterman, this one, that one, Jon Stewart. And man, Miles, my son, I think I posted a photo of us or something, and he called me like, oh my God, out of all the people who were there, I'm so jealous that you're with Brother Ali right now. He was like, he's my favorite. You know, he was like freaking out. And I was like, man, like, look at that, you know, the destiny of it all. You know what I mean? Like, even like, he's like, I've been listening to Brother Ali so much, I can't believe it. You know, sitting there with
And
him.
I've experienced
That's
that as well. Like my
touching.
whole life, man, that there are artists that, that I feel them, I care about them, and the divine always brings me to them to the point where I don't ever even push it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like Dave is one of those people for me, and I know he was for you too. But like I just let it happen because I know and believe and trust that it will. And I had
Yeah.
come across Dave, many times, and he would always, if he was in Minneapolis, like he would have me come and play the juke joint and all these different kind of things. So we connected,
Hmm.
but that was my first time really getting to sit and talk to him. And
Right.
you captured that moment. There's a photo that you took of the two of us. And once we
Hmm.
started really breaking it down, it's like, when Dave ran away from his show and he was traveling around, especially the Muslim world, so South Africa, all this stuff, he saw me on Conan O'Brien, the only time they let me on Conan O'Brien. He was at a Saudi prince's house, and he's like, man, you know how every time he talks, it sounds like one of his like speeches. He's like, man,
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
was like, I'm in Saudi Arabia of all places, and I felt so out of place. I just wanted something to make me feel connected. And I was like, what am I doing here? I asked the guy to turn on the television, and he turned flipping through the channels. I see Conan O'Brien, and so he was watching me around the same time that I was
Right.
watching him, and then we
Well.
found out, I know his brother, and he came to town one time, and he for a long time, he's a motorcycle enthusiast, and the valet at the W Hotel was my brother, and Dave's bike broke down, so my brother put him on the back of his bike and took him to the shop.
Oh
All
well.
of these just amazing things
Yeah.
that come together. And he's
Yeah.
like, man, why are we just talking now? And I was like, man, I was just waiting for Allah to do it. And he cried, man. I mean, you know how Dave is, man. Like he
Well.
cried and was
No.
just like, yeah, this is it.
What I was going to say about inspiration is like, when I met you, when I met Amir Suleiman, uh, you know, out of everybody in the summer camp thing, no offense to anyone, because we made a lot of friends that summer. It was the most incredible time ever. But there was a thing where I was like, I know these guys.
Yes.
I can't explain it,
Yeah.
but I know you guys. I kept thinking to myself, it's like, oh, here's another Muslim brother. You know, now I got all these new people that I met that I feel like are like true friends.
Family,
You
yeah,
know,
man. Yeah. And I mean our worldview is
and
the same.
and so
And
yeah,
our
and that's the thing people need to understand.
yes. I mean the way that we relate to the creator through documenting the creation, and ultimately, I mean, that's what we're doing. There's something about the fact that, there's this myth of individualism and like the self-made star. And so for every one of these great people, there are these amazing artists that the camera is on and that are in the frame and that are in focus and are in the spotlight. In order for them to be who they are and to be recognized as being who they are, there's got to be truly amazing people that are part of that process as well, that are part of documenting
Hmm.
them. So sometimes we know them, but it's pretty rare that there is a Quincy Jones, for example. So the world might have heard Off the Wall and Thriller and never known Quincy Jones, but those albums don't exist
Right,
without Quincy. You know,
right.
the part of why we know Malcolm X is because of Gordon Parks. taking
Right.
these iconic photographs. Part of why
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
know, some of the brilliance of the early hip hop stuff is because of Jamal Shabazz. Part of why we know Jay-Z is because of Young Guru and like his ability to capture, to help Jay-Z get into the
Hmm.
spiritual space, to create, to be there with him, to talk it through. One of the great poet Rumi. We know Rumi's
I love
work,
Rumi.
but Rumi only got in the state where, so Rumi is a lot like Jay-Z. And Rumi, when he got into that state where he would be able to create, he never wrote any of that stuff down. There's a man, Hasamuddin Chelebi, that was the scribe. And people thought like, oh, he just sits there and writes what Rumi says. But the reality is that Rumi got in that state where he was safe, comfortable, understood enough to get into that state when Hasamuddin Chelebi was around. And then also Hasamuddin, like a lot of times would catalog and would help to organize. And some people even say that the Mesnevi, the greatest work of Rumi, was the request of Hasamuddin Chelebi. So all of these great people need, I would argue, equally great people around them. So there's
Hmm.
something about like what you're able, the fact that you have been trusted and loved and brought in and recognized as, like, I've seen you with Dave. I didn't get to see you with Prince. I've never seen you around Lenny Kravitz. I've never seen you around, I didn't see you and Melvin Van Peebles, but there's a reason that you're able to, it's not just the picture. Like Dave is very cool.
Right.
Dave's very cool looking. Prince obviously is very cool.
Right.
Lenny is one of the coolest looking people of all time. But there's something about the way that you photograph them that it's not only the two-dimensional picture, but there's something that you feel in the way that you
Right.
capture them. What is that thing, and what can you share with us about what that is?
So just to clarify one thing, I never photographed Prince as much as I wish I had. I worked more on design and consulting things,
Mm,
but sadly never photographed him. But Lenny, obviously, I spent over a decade traveling with
mm,
a lot of these other people you mentioned. I think what it is like I feel like it's like a psychic purpose. Like I feel like there's a purpose when I shoot certain people. Like when we get that close, as I am with Dave, or with Lenny, or even when like other brothers of mine, like Ben Harper, or like you said, when I was with Melvin Van Peebles, there's or Quincy, there's the sense of purpose is like stronger than the gig. You know what I mean? Like so all aspects of it being work disappears. And I think that's really important. I think for me, I'm never thinking like, oh, cool. Okay, so I'm getting paid today, or I know my bills are going to be paid. You know what I mean? I'm like, I have the gift of being in these people's presence. I choose whose presence I get to be in, but they also chose me, which is huge. I can't just decide I'm going to be Dave Chappelle's photographer. He's got to decide to let me in. And when I talk about the psychic moment, is I always see like when people are like, "Oh my God, this picture is so iconic. How did you get that?" I see that picture sounds might sound a little strange, but I see the image before it happens.
mhm,
That's why I call it like a psychic purpose. So I know that image is about to happen. So like by the time I've hit the shutter, that image, it would be too late to see the moment and take it. And one thing I tell young photographers a lot is like, I never have these pictures never look like this. I was like, because you're waiting for the moment and then you capture the moment, which means the moment, by the time you hit the shutter, the moment's
mhm,
passed. So that magical moment, you have to foresee it. You have to have a trust and a kind of a psychic moment where I know he's about to do this. I know he's about to move that way with the cigarette. I know the smoke is going to come out this direction because the wind is blowing that. It's just kind of this whole thing. It's not just random, and it's different. But like maybe when you shoot a concert or something, something unexpected might happen. But for me, it's a duty and a purpose because I know that I don't want to waste their time, and I don't want to waste. If I'm away from my family, if I'm away from my lady, if I'm away from my kids, luckily my kids work with me a lot, but you know, then this has to mean something. I can't just be like the dude following somebody around taking pictures at their whim. You know what I mean?
yes. Sign of the Times is your favorite record of all time, right? And you worked on the reissue box
I
set
worked
of
on
the.
that. Yeah. 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 It's Sign of the Times. And we did the Welcome to America album, which I got to design and the box set, and then we just
Did you
recently did
meet
it.
Dave at Prince's, like at a Prince
Yeah.
event?
So the very first time, my friend Ruth Arzate, who was Prince's manager, had been his assistant, became his manager. I was in the middle of sushi dinner on Thompson Street in New York with a friend, and was like about to have dinner. And Ruth texted me like, "Come over to the Gansevoort. Prince is, Prince is going to do something on the rooftop." But she goes, "Come alone," which she would always tell me, "Come alone," So I'm like, oh, but she's like, "But come now, otherwise you won't get in. It's very small." So I tell this person like, "Hey, again, the family emergency. That's always the excuse. I have a family emergency. I'm so sorry." And she's like, "What? You have family here?" No, no. Well, it's a work emergency, and I'm so sorry. I like paid the bill, enjoyed the dinner. You know what I mean? I'm so sorry to do this to you. Uh, I will make this up to you. You know what I mean? Like, I'll take you to whatever restaurant you want tomorrow, but I have to leave. I'm so sorry. So I run over there and get into the front door. They have a list, and I see my name handwritten on it. They're like, "You're not on the list." I'm like, "That's my name handwritten on there. Like, I was added last minute." They're like, "Okay, okay." So I go in, the elevator's about to close, and I'm like, "Excuse me." I put my hand open the elevator, and there's Dave standing there. I think Fred Yone was there, uh and some other people. I didn't know them, so I don't really remember them. I'm sure I know them all now. And so I'm like in the elevator, like, "Oh shit, Dave Chappelle." You know what I mean? Like, shook his hand, and then it was a legendary night. Kevin Mazur was taking photos, my dear friend. And so that was like the first time I technically met him. But then flash forward 2011 at a Grammy after party at Prince's house. Um, Lenny and I went to the Grammys, and I was like, I got the text. You would always get this text like, "Party at Prince's house." So I get the text. I'm like, Lenny was like, "I want to go to bed. I'm tired." I'm like, "No, no, 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 no. We're going to Prince's house for a party." And he's like, "Man, I'm tired." I'm like, "I know, but it's going to look way better if I show up with you than if I show up by myself." so drag Lenny. It was like too early too. It was like 10:30. We get there. They're looking at us like, Kieran, who was working with Prince, looks at us like, "Oh, you guys are here really early." I was like, "I don't know. I got the text. I didn't. There was no time on the text." He's like, "Well, it's always like midnight at the earliest." So we go there. We're hanging out, and Lenny falls asleep on this couch. In some purple couch in the house, and then we were like shooting pool on Prince's purple velvet pool table. And then Fred Yone walks up to me, and he's like, "Hey, you're French, right? We had met at the Grammys earlier that night, like around Will Smith or something." And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah." So we started talking. I was like, "Oh," he's like, "I'm here with Dave." And I was like, "Oh shit, let's go say hello." So I go up and start talking to Dave. And I'm like, "Well, I'm here with Lenny, but he's sleeping." So we went over to the room and like woke Lenny up, and we're all hanging out. And then next, Prince walks in like on a magic carpet. He flows in. He doesn't walk. He's flowing into the room, and we
Mm.
had like a great night. He was with Misty Copeland at the time, and Janelle Monáe, and he performed in the living room. It was one of those magical nights. But so that's when like we actually hung the first time and talked with Dave, and apparently he thought I was a French gangster. I had like this whole leather coat, like shaft looking leather coat, and I had long hair slicked back, and the stubble, and he's told me many times at one point I was like talking to Prince, and he was like, "I thought you were a gangster." Like, I just thought you were like, it was really funny. So flash forward to 2015, same friend Ruth, who's like a guardian, a living guardian angel in my life. She's one of the people I love the most, dear friends. She's like, "Hey, I was talking to Dave, and I was talking to Carla, his publicist, and he's kind of getting ready to go, back out, blah blah blah. So I want to connect you guys. I told him you should shoot, for him." And so Carla called me, went to I think Bahia Club or something in LA in 2015. Shot the first show, and the rest is really history. Like, since then, especially in 2016 when he did the Age of Spin, was like my first like actual gig. Shooting all the photos for that, and been doing it. All the pictures you see in the specials and everything, the end credits, and doing all that stuff, and working on design, albums, posters. It's been a lot of fun.
So a lot of us that are artists, like we know that there's a lot of dope artists. My life is full of amazing artists that not the whole world doesn't know, but if you know them, then
Right.
they're your favorite ones. So it's like, we walk around in public, nobody notices us, but if somebody does notice us, they might have our face tattooed on them. Like, we're very important
Right.
to a very select group of people. And that's
Right.
one level of the game, and then there's, another level of like the kind of people who hang around Dave. But then there's Dave Chappelle, and then there's Prince, and then there's,
Right.
and it's your job to look at these people and to observe them and to really take them in. What, in your observation, is the difference between somebody who are these like truly iconic, timeless artists? What's the difference between them and the rest of us?
Well, I wouldn't say us because you're included in those great iconic artists, but I think it's just a gift that's unexplainable. But I think a lot of people probably have that gift, but don't have the discipline, to polish it and to every day go at it. He's been doing it since he was 14, and he's nowhere near stopping. So I think that discipline is probably the secret. I think a lot of people think they have discipline because they work. You see people go in the studio like, oh yeah, we cut this album in a whole week, but I mean, this whole album in 1 week, and you listen to it and you're like, yeah, I can tell you cut it in a week. You know what I mean?
Right. And then you listen to
And
Thriller, and
so,
they cut like 200 records for Thriller and chose the
right.
top 9 or something.
Yeah, exactly. And Prince is a little different because he did record fast, and they were like a lot of masterpieces. But most people, I think, could. It's okay to spend a good amount of time. I'm sure with Amir, it's the same. He might have written this thing a long time ago, but he's still polishing it every time I see him perform something. So yeah.
There's something else about like these truly like great icons too that they do all seem to have a visual sense of not only their work but of themselves. Like, they understand,
Hmm.
like when we say that somebody is an icon, like what we mean is that you can look at them, and there's just something about them. You think about like, if you just close your eyes and imagine Chuck D. You know what I mean? You see like the
Right.
brim of his hat, and you see the shape of his shoulders, and you see the
Yeah.
jacket that he's wearing. And with all of these iconic artists, and Chuck D also designed the logo for Public Enemy.
Hmm.
It seems like there is something very visual related to these true greats, even if their main way of communicating is audio. Like, they do have something
Right.
visual, and I wonder, like, what would you do? You agree with that, and to what do you attribute that? Is it a sense of like their understanding that they have a role to play in history, or that the world needs them to be an icon?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I hate the word branding, but I think there is a brand, like Dave, wears the Chappelle and the C, and we all wear, like I'll wear the stuff, and Prince had a symbol, and everybody's wearing a symbol, and I think in a way, I don't see it like an idolatry thing. I don't see it like they're trying to be like Jesus and that's the cross. You know what I mean? But I think it's based on history in a sense that like every great tribe has a logo. You know what I mean? Has a symbol, and so it also is market. It's like very smart marketing. To have an icon that every time somebody thinks of you, they see. And so a lot of artists don't have that, but those who do, you instantly know, you're going to see that Public Enemy, you know, logo, you don't, it's like the Nike swoosh. You don't need to put Nike on it, and, same with all the Prince symbol. And, uh, I think it's just smart business, but it's art. It's like becomes your moniker, so to speak, and it's something that your fans can wear, you know, and show up with the keychain thing, and have the T-shirt, and they're all wearing the T-shirt. I think the Prince did an amazing job with that symbol. Like, I just see like at the Blue Note thing, I can't tell you how many people were wearing symbol necklaces. The show had nothing to do with Prince, but I must have seen like 80 people wearing, Prince merch. Some of it I designed. That was kind of a fun, fun feeling. But I think it's just creating the icon. Like you're almost creating your own icon status, And so by sticking to it for all these years, like Chappelle with the logo, Public Enemy. I'm trying to think of other. I feel like Bad Brains. Like there's a lot of like artists where like you see the thing
Yeah.
automatically. AC/DC, and that's their name, but they kept the same logo for their name, throughout their
You
career.
know,
Kiss,
oh yeah, it's deep. LP is somebody that comes out of the same circle of artists that we started with from Run the Jewels, and I mean LP has been
Oh
making
yeah,
the same aesthetic of music for 30 years. You know what I mean? And he's been somebody in kind of my realm that's like, in this
right,
underground thing, like if you know this circle of artists, then he's going to be one of your favorites. And if his music is part of your life, it's as much a part of your life as anything else. But he was really for
right,
years and years just relegated to this same kind of grind that I seem to be in.
right,
And then
right,
when they did Run the Jewels, he's doing the same thing that he's always done. Like this,
right,
LP basically, being this Jewish kid from Red Hook, Brooklyn, coming into the culture and, had this very specific sound. And then, having these hood poets spitting over his really kind of, disjointed kind of music. When he did that with Killer Mike, he's done the same thing over and over and over again.
right,
But
right.
this time
Yeah,
they got the logo. You know what I mean? They got the
right.
hand, the fist holding the chain, and they got the other one with the gun.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
there's
yeah,
something about that logo, the Run DMC logo.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
y-
I was thinking of that one.
Man, Immortal Technique has had the same 2 or 3 albums, and he's had one shirt design for his entire career. and, and
That's kind of
and the brother
amazing.
goes on tour, and I mean, there's 1,000 people in a room, and they all will buy that shirt over again. And
Right.
it's one of the
That's
things that I
amazing.
never, I'm partially blind, man, and
Right.
I've never had like the definitive Brother Ali logo. I've just never had that before.
Oh, you need that.
Part of the reason that we're able to bring you this really, beautiful, healing, connecting content is because of the fact that we're not relying on the music industry. We're not relying on big podcast networks. We're not relying on corporate sponsors. And we don't even want to have to rely on the algorithms of social media. Social media is there for the same purpose as all of these other big outlets. When people were for a long time was like, man, F Clear Channel, we're going to bring down Clear Channel. And, now people are going in on Ticketmaster and all of these other, these big corporations. Because they do have a huge impact on what comes through. The people that pay the bills are the gatekeepers and what have you. Social media is the same way. So if you follow us on Instagram, that's super dope. We appreciate it. I will continue to do Instagram for as long as I need to. Same thing with Facebook, same thing with Twitter, same thing with TikTok and YouTube and all of these. I'm grateful they exist because there is a certain level of accessibility there. But the reality is that all of them are corporate interests that are controlled by driving traffic. And they will do whatever drives traffic, including, coax people into arguing and fighting and polarizing our society and making people more entrenched in their own, little micro communities so that we no longer agree on anything in society anymore. All of this stuff, when people start arguing on my threads, I delete the comments. I'm sorry, I do. You can argue anywhere on the internet. And I've noticed that when people start arguing in the comment section of one of my posts, they will start sharing that post like crazy. The exposure, the reach, the engagement, all of that stuff starts to go through the roof. And the second I hide those comments, delete those comments, because I just don't want to be a place where people argue. That's not what I'm here for. I'm not for arguing. I'm here for connecting. I'm here for reaching out. There are people that argue, and I support those. There are people that's their role in life, but that's not my calling. So as soon as I delete those argumentative comments, those polarizing comments, people using buzzwords and catchphrases and talking points and disparaging each other and calling people names. Sometimes people would be calling somebody names in defense of me. It's like, nah, man, we're not here for that. I delete that stuff. Some people hit me up. You deleted my comments. This is censorship. It's not. You can argue on 1,000 other platforms. That's not what I'm here for. But the truth is that as soon as I delete those things, I notice that the engagement stops. The exposure stops. They stop showing it. My man Open Mike Eagle, shout out to Open Mike Eagle, great podcaster, man. Please check out Secret Skin and What Had Happened Was and Stony Island Audio, all that stuff. He always says, man, when you do these things, the robots like us. This will make the robots like us. Well, you know what I'm saying? I'm right in the same boat as Mike, man. And so I'm saying all this to say, I want to connect with you directly. Please go to brotherali.com, sign the mailing list, and check out the caravan. Hell, a long way to get to the point, man. But, we release things, we do things. I want to hit you directly. I don't want to have to rely on algorithms. I don't want you to hear about the sold out show in Minneapolis that sold out in a couple hours. I don't want you to hear about it after the fact, because social media is going to get it to you whenever they feel like it. You know what I mean? I don't want you to find out that the 12-inch we dropped or the this thing that we did unlimited number of, you don't find out about it till after it's sold out and you're mad at me. I want you to know if you care about the things that we do, then head to brotherali.com, sign the mailing list, check out the caravan. It's all really beautiful stuff, and we're very, very grateful for your support. Oud and Mentory, the product called Oud, is based on a tree that grows in Southeast Asia that they call aloes wood. And this wood is spoken of in scripture. It's something that human beings have known about for centuries. It has healing properties because of the fact that the trees are infected with a fungus and they produce a natural property, a natural antibody to fight off the fungus. That antibody, that naturally produced protection against fungus, is what transforms the tree from being aloes wood to being oud. That natural property, if it's distilled into oil, or if the wood itself is burned over coals, the natural healing properties are released. And I'm telling you, I wish there was a way for you to smell what comes out of this amazing process. The great poet Amir Suleiman that we talk about in this episode says, there's so much beauty in breaking. Can you birth without bleeding and screaming and crying? Can you smell the oud without lighting it? Can you drink from the coconut without striking it? This relationship between love and loss, this relationship between beauty and breaking. That's from a beautiful Amir Suleiman poem called Of Beauty and Breaking. That this process that the oud goes through actually brings out these properties. And the same is true with the human story. So when you light the oud or when you wear it on your body, this beautiful smell that people are smelling, it's also got a challenging note to it. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes there are people that are like, man, what is this funk? Sometimes it's a little harsh to smell. Sometimes you want to put the oud oil on a while before you go outside, because if people smell it immediately, it's like, man, what is this thing? And it's tied in with the human story. It's tied in with the hero's story. That like the challenges we go through in life are the things that reveal the beauty in us. We wouldn't know that we're courageous if it wasn't for fear. We wouldn't know that we're generous if it wasn't for being in need. You know what I'm saying? So all of this is tied into the meaning of oud, but when you smell it, that's when you're going to know that there's a truth here that's being communicated. So I don't know how to describe it to you any better than that, but if you light this stuff, it will be in your room, in your clothes, in your nose, in your heart, and in your soul for a long time. If you wear the oil, it just brings with it a reality that's hard to describe. It's not cheap. The beautiful hidden treasures in the world rarely are, but everybody that I know from this podcast that's tried it has hit me up and slid in the DMs and just been like, yo, I believed you because I believe you, because I trust you. But man, when this stuff came and I made it part of my life, you know, there's an undefinable quality to it. So go to Udimentary, OUDIMENTARY.com. When you get to the checkout area, put in travelers to let them know that we sent you, and they'll give you a little something off because we're cool like that. Much love to Udimentary. You know, and when you're around these iconic people, and I've been blessed to be around a number of them, there's a certain heaviness to them that seems to be, especially in their private moments. You know, and you can see Dave, who a lot of times has a lot of people around, and you'll see him just having these private moments. And I think a lot of them are this way because of their
Mhm.
understanding of their responsibility and of their place. You know,
Right.
that there's a certain heaviness and a certain responsibility that they carry. And, you know, I wonder, is that a moment that you, as someone that's documenting them, are those moments that you capture?
Definitely. But you have to know when to and when not to. You know what I mean? So you have to really. One of the mistakes I see a lot of people do is that whole thing of like, you see somebody as a celebrity, oh my God, take a picture. Like they don't engage, they don't ask, they don't, and that'll just piss people off. And so even though I'm there doing it and we're close, we're like family now, I still have to be respectful of a moment. I still have to feel, is he in deep thought right now, or is he going through something that he wouldn't want to be photographed? You know what I mean? Is he reacting to something that? So I use my best judgment and instinct, but I do try to capture those off moments quite a bit, and they make for really good pictures sometimes because it's just like you almost see a different person. You see like the non-celebrity side of that celebrity, and that's really important. I have photos of like Lenny sleeping, for example. Like
Mm.
I always had like a card to his room when we're on tour because maybe like, you know, I would go like, I don't know, help to set up his shit or like, work on photos in his room or play with cameras or charge the batteries or whatever. So sometimes I'd be like, yo, can I like take pictures of you? Like, sneak in and take pictures of you sleeping. He's like, sure, whatever. We were that close that it wouldn't be weird, and I've got some great pictures like that. I didn't do it often, obviously, otherwise it's not that special anymore. But, it's definitely those off moments that make for very special photos, and I think you also have to know like when not to shoot. One thing that actually Jay-Z told me not too long ago, the last time I saw him, or maybe the time before, is he said, what I like about you is like you're around and stuff, but you're not always shooting.
Mm.
So we don't have to feel like, oh, okay, we're being photographed again. I might take a picture and put the camera away. When I met Nipsey Hussle at the Peppermint Club, was like J Ti, I went with Dave, and like that day I came up, say hi to Jay Z. I met Nipsey Hussle. I had a camera. Somehow my instinct told me, don't take pictures, just hang out with
Mm.
them. I never took a picture. When he passed, I was like, man, I wish I'd taken a picture that night, but it wasn't meant to be because if I don't listen to my instinct, then, what's my next move when I don't listen to my instinct, but something might go wrong. And that's the one thing at 49, if I've learned anything, is to listen to my instinct. It took me like 40 years. So that's important. But, I do appreciate that too, that it's not just like somebody's like, oh my God, like this guy, yeah, we're hanging, he's cool, but he like keeps taking pictures the whole time. Like I'll take a few and then, if I see another moment, I'll take another photo, but it's not going to be like, you see these guys like drive me crazy. I can only imagine what that's like as an artist to have like somebody with like the machine gun. I see that stuff. I'm like, man, how do you guys, you can't do that, and you got to make it more personal.
Yeah, because then a person never gets that. You never actually are able to have them just live and just be, which is
Right.
ultimately what you're
Yeah.
hoping to document. Is like, what is this person
Yeah.
like when they're just
Right.
living, when they're breathing, when they're being a person? Yeah, and if the camera's constantly going, it's hard to do that.
Yeah.
There's a million things I could ask you about, brother. You've been so generous with your time, man. Um, but I kind of want to get
Mm,
to like the overarching message, because you are every bit the artist as the people that you're working with. You're really collaborating with them,
mm.
and man, like I said before, that it really requires a truly great artist that is their equal, their peer, in order to be able to be with them. And I think that's why they're so open to you. And Dave said some really beautiful things about you actually when I was there, to me. But
Well,
I wonder, the book that you did, Darker Than Blue, if you could really just wrap up with, as an artist yourself, the legacy that you're leaving, the message that you're leaving. When you look at your body of work, a lot of times you see them in different. You see, if you're looking at a Dave thing, or if you're looking at the Miles Davis box set or something like that, you see, but if you were to put it all together, the message that you're hoping to, and I know you're just beginning, but the message that you're hoping to impart on the world about humanity and blackness and art and culture.
it's the most cliche slogan of Black is beautiful, but honestly, like ever since I was a kid, that's the culture that spoke to me. That's the imagery that spoke to me, the music that spoke to me. And I remember in high school when I first moved to LA, North Hollywood High, and like my best friend Asa Washington, who like he took me to like see Farrakhan, and I was like the only white dude there. I went to see X Clan. I was the only white dude there. I was just that guy. You know what I
Have
mean?
you
I was
ever
just like,
photographed Farrakhan?
no, I would though. So my thing as far as legacy is, it's actually that you know when I had the Darker Than Blue show at the Leica Gallery in LA, this dude walked in with like a Bentley and this bimbo girlfriend, whatever, and he came up to me, he was looking around, he's like, I don't understand, why is it all black people, why don't you have some white people, this is racist, and I was like, oh wow, well, first of all, do I even want to take the time to talk to you right now? I don't really, because I already know your bigotry is showing through,
Hmm.
And the girl is like, "Oh my God, why are you saying that? That's so rude." I was like, "Well, she's smarter than you."
Hmm.
But uh, when I see the world that we live in, when I see the levels of rage and racism and hate and insecurity, which essentially the insecurity turns into hate, um, all I see is beauty. Honestly, all I see is beauty. And when I open this book, I'm so proud of. And again, some people have been saying, "Oh, white guy taking photos of black people and all that stuff." And I'm like, but look at my history, look at my family, look at my roots, look at my work, look at everything I've done. This is not I'm not doing this as a status. I'm not doing it to be hip. I'm not jumping on the bandwagon. This is me since day one. This is me, sneaking into a Ray Charles show like 8 years old or whatever I was. This is me, going to uh, mostly black shows, going to see John Lee Hooker, going to see, this is what moves me. And there's such beauty in the culture. And actually, because I feel like it's just been so abused, so somebody might say like, oh, well, you're, making money off of this. First of all, I've not made a dollar off the book because the quality of the book is so nice. I had to basically give up
I already know.
and making any money
Yeah,
just to
if
use the
that joint's
quality,
not $200, then you might lose money on it.
Yeah, and it was like $60 or something, So there's no way. But that was my decision. That's not what it's about,
Hmm.
And when I actually did a fundraiser raising money for all these, during the after the uprising of George Floyd protests. I did a fundraiser and actually sold all the prints, gave all the profits away, and raised a lot of money for a lot of great small organizations. A lot of them in Minneapolis because I wanted to, put money there. But to me, it's about that, it's about this beautiful culture, and you see these beautiful people. There is no difference in a way. It's like, yes, I could go to Cuba and anywhere. I can do these photos anywhere, and they'll look beautiful. But for me, this is the most beautiful culture that's given me the most pleasure through their music, through their movies, through their art. So in a way, it's like me just honoring what I love, you know, and it's so my legacy inevitably is intertwined with, you know, Black history because that's all I can remember. That's what, you know, even, you know, my favorite movie, Orfeo Negro, Black Orpheus, you know, that I have like 90 different posters from all over the world from that movie. You know, yes, it's Brazil, but it's Black, it's French, it's, you know, the director's French, it's a mix of cultures, but it's just beautiful. I don't see it necessarily as much. Somebody might think like, you know, I just see it as like black, black, black. I just see the beauty in it, and I just feel more than what I see. It's what I feel. At this point in my life, I really only want to work, you know, with people that inspire me. You know, I don't really have this. You know, I get calls for a lot of things, but I always politely decline. Like, you know, well, if it's not something that I feel in my heart, you know, it's not really, you know, if you can't give me the Amir Suleiman effect, you know what I mean? Like, if I can't be, that's an extreme example because I don't think I've ever reacted to anything like I reacted to that first time he performed that
Thank you,
in front of
brother.
me, you know.
Yeah,
But
man.
you know, like thinking about what we were just saying, in all these experiences,
Hmm.
I do feel like a guest in this incredible universe. So like, I think wasn't there a Rumi poem called "The Guest House"?
Hmm.
I think there was something, yeah, you know, where it's like I'm just a guest here. I'm just allowed to be here doing what I
Yeah.
do. The best musicians in the world, I get to photograph it. You know, you got like every, you know, the Glasper crew and
Yeah.
Kamasi Washington,
Yeah.
Keon Harold and Christian Scott. I mean, come on, you know what I mean?
Yassine and
Atunde
Snoop and
Yassine and Snoop and everybody, you know, Kweli. I mean, it just like goes on, and you're just like, okay, I'm so blessed to, this is my job. You know what I mean? Like I'm here working, but I'm going to bed at night inspired by everything I've just heard and everything I've just seen and the laughter. My main thing is that I want to just honor the luck, you know, and I want to honor this whatever this power is that's putting me in these places. I want to allow whatever that power is, whatever that energy is, you know, to like take over and like whatever the next chapter is, you know, or whatever I'm meant to do. I know that this is no coincidence, you know what I mean? And for so many years, I was just like, that's a funny coincidence. I just went to see this movie at a theater, and Prince just sat down behind me at a movie theater in Westwood. You know what I mean? That just doesn't happen. You know what I mean? And 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 this is in the '80s. You know what I mean? So it's like so many things would happen like that where I'm like, okay, come on, like this is crazy. I'll tell you a little anecdote because it's a strong one about, you know, I was walking to I was in New York, and I'm walking down the street, and I was listening to The Bridge by Sonny Rollins, you know,
mm,
on my headphones, and just like flowing through life. Just I decided instead of taking the subway, just like the old days, I'm gonna walk all the way to this meeting. So I left at like 6 a.m. and I get to like Union Square or something, and I'm like at the bridge on repeat. You know, I'm listening to this one of my favorite albums, and then I look to the left, and there's a guy with like this little like kind of suitcase, and I look to the left, and I was like, Sonny Rollins. He's like, hey man, and I was like, I give up. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I gave up. And this is happened to me over and over.
Hmm.
And it's just, you know, just a reminder where the universe is telling me, okay, you're on the right path. And when certain other things happen, things went bad, the universe is telling me you're not on the right, you're not on the right path, you know?
Well, man, I appreciate you. I love you dearly, man, and I'm so inspired by you, and just yeah, I just feel really, really that moment in Yellow Springs. I mean, that was for me. You know, right before that was my low point of my life as an
Oh,
adult,
wow.
and so that
Wow.
thing, you know, came at the moment that I needed it the most. You know, and I have a new lease on life since then. And
That's
and it
wonderful.
was it was
That,
born in
yeah.
those few days, you know, being there with Mo and then you know, and being there with Dave. But then also you and Mustafa were the parts that I, you know, David Banner came down and I love
Right.
Yassine and I love Kweli and you know, man, that was my first time connecting with Michelle Wolf and now she's like a freak. I
Oh,
will kill everybody
she's the
for
great.
Michelle Wolf. I love her so much. But there was something very specifically about connecting with you and Mustafa and the things that both of you guys said to me that were really affirming of my purpose, because you guys have no reason to say the things that were said to me, but then also just the mutual knowing of like
Hmm.
seeing you, and I knew who you were, but I didn't fully grasp it, and I'm still, like I said, learning all of these amazing things that
Hmm.
you've done, and look forward to learning, inshallah, for the rest of our lives. But there was something about the acknowledgement of you and Mustafa that I was like, oh, it's not just an art thing, it's not just a career thing, but really like this new lease that I have on life. I really, a lot of it is connected to those 5 days or whatever that I spent in Yellow Springs with you guys, man.
No, that's beautiful, man. And there's something, the Yellow Springs experience of 2020, where I mean, dude, like I broke both my arms
That's
doing
right.
that and kept
Yes, you
shooting every
did.
single day,
Damn it. Yes, you
and
did.
in a crazy amount of pain. So I gained 60 pounds from eating over that pain, which I'm working on losing now. But I would never take it back. You know what? Because what it showed me was the sense of community that I got. Dave said something to me. I have to shout him out for this, because when I was in the hospital and I couldn't move my arms, and I was like, David Letterman's arriving tomorrow. I got to shoot.
Yeah.
We got to shoot the next day. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I was like freaking out. And this woman's like, the doctor was like, you need to go home. You know, you're not going to be able to shoot for at least 3 months, maybe 6 months. And I'm like freaking out. And Dave said something when I called him, because I was like, man, I'm so sorry. Like, I fucked up. Like I borrowed Mo's scooter and crashed it. And, now
Yeah.
I can't shoot. And Dave goes, man, that's fucked up. Like, and I thought he was upset, because here he is, he's paying me to be there. And I did this thing and now I can't do my job. And he's like, what are you going to do? I'm like, I know. I'm trying to figure it out. Like, I can't move, but he's like, how are you going to jerk off? And I was like, man, I thought he was upset, like he was about to tell me like you fucked up, man. And then he says that, and I laughed so hard. He was on speed. He was on FaceTime, and
Oh
the doctor and the nurses were in the room. Started laughing so loud, and then I started laughing so much that I moved like my left arm a little
my
bit.
god.
He made
Oh.
me laugh so hard that I like moved my left arm, and all of a sudden I could kind of move it, which is how I realized
Oh.
I can use my left arm to shoot. But what Dave said, that was the most hilarious shit. So it took all the pressure off. Like everybody was laughing all of a sudden, which is the genius of Dave Chappelle.
Oh
Like
my
he
god.
relieved the
Yeah.
situation in one joke. And then, but you know
Yeah.
what he said, that like actually changed my life, because I didn't know. I love Dave, and I knew how much but he said, listen, man, I don't care if you shoot another photo, you're not going home, because you're part of this, and you're here. I want
Mm.
you here. And he's like, you're part of the spirit
Mhm.
of this thing. And even if you just stay to enjoy the shows, I'm keeping you here all
Mm.
summer. And when he said that, I was like tearing up, and I was like, I'm fighting for this shit. I will be there tomorrow shooting. And we flew miles out, my son, and he came out and
Yeah.
was moving the cameras and setting up and all, and lifting my hand onto the camera that I could move, and at least I could move my fingers. And then 2 weeks after that, Julian, my youngest son, came out and helped me for the rest of the time till I could actually get my arm out of the sling and all that. But the fact that I realized, like, this is not about me being a hired photographer. This is family, and
Yeah.
he's proving to me that
Yes.
he wants me here regardless, and that, that's who he is. And there was such a support system around that I just felt like, wow, I've never experienced anything like this. At some point I feel like I got to do some kind of thing, show, podcast, something, and break down all these things that I love so much. But I'm glad to be once again the guest here today, and that you took this time. I really appreciate that. It means a lot to me.
No, thank you, brother. Thank you. You were very near the top of the list of people when we rolled this out a few months ago. Man, we gotta reach out. So thank you so
I'm
very
so
much.
honored.
Let's do it again.
Absolutely. I'll see you soon, hopefully.
All right. Love you, brother. Take good care.
Love you, man.
Peace, peace.
Peace.
We mentioned so often in this conversation between me and my brother Matteo that really, when we connected, was in this beautiful experience with Dave Chappelle in 2020, Chappelle Summer Camp in Yellow Springs, Ohio. Maybe someday I'll tell the story of that in a little bit more detail, but I wasn't exaggerating when I said that that was an extremely important moment for me that really gave me a new lease on life, and that's where we connected. And so many of us were invited to that situation. I mean, Kwali told me about it and told me I should come, and Yassine Bey told me about it. But the one that made sure that I was there was my dear brother, Mo Amer. If you've had a chance to see his Netflix special, he has a Netflix TV show coming out that I've got I rap a little bit in that show. But Mo Amer is a brilliant Palestinian American brother. We love him so much, and he just lost his brother. And so this one is dedicated to our dear, beloved brother, Mo Amer. Inshallah, he'll be on the Travelers podcast soon. But sending this one out to him. Thank you so much to Mathieu Bitton for just being so gracious and generous with his time, with his insight, with his stories, with his wisdom. Much love to Dave Chappelle. Much love to the whole crew, to the whole squad. And yeah, we're deeply grateful. Special thanks to Mansour Panawala, Amna Mirza, to Last Word, to Darian Washington, to Aida Rashid, to Mo Amer, all of the people that make sure that this thing is what it is and who contribute in such a variety of different ways. Travelers Podcast is produced by Brendan Kelly, a.k.a. BK1, and it is a production of Travelers Media. I love you guys a lot. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.